1651. In the quaint rural village of Hundikov, nestled in the Alpine Mountains, it is a day of terror and blood. Hundreds of screams cascade down the side of the mountain, along with a cacophony of footsteps in every direction. The town guards have tried their best, but have fallen short in the face of the terror that has befallen their village on this day. But how can you blame them? They were trained to defend the village against men, not monsters. It had all started when a scout had left the village earlier in the day. Scouts play an important role in village life. Fast and observant, eagle-eyed, they can detect everything from passing herds of deer, perfect for keeping the village fed, to roving bands of enemies in the distance. But in this particular instance, the scout's behavior had led to the village's demise rather than its safety. While climbing amidst the craggy, snow-capped rocks of the mountain, one scout noticed something unnatural. A strange and monstrous creature was loping across the snow. It looked almost human, but not quite. It was too long, too emaciated, and unclothed despite the sub-zero temperatures. It was moving on all fours, its unnaturally extended forearms helping it drag itself through the snow. The scout pulled out a spyglass to get a closer look, seeing as the creature was at least 100 feet further down the mountain. The second he stared down the length of the telescope, though, seeing the creature in all its horrible splendor, he felt a shock of regret vibrate through his body. The scout, so finely attuned to observing between the lines, somehow just sensed that he'd seen something he shouldn't have. It was that face, wasn't it? That awful face. So gaunt and lifeless, like that of a dead man, but stretched. Blank eyes and a wide, yawning mouth. In a world before horror movies, he'd never seen anything like it. It rewrote his very understanding of the world, harkening back to childhood tales of demons and evil spirits. But this was different. It was real. So very real. And then it turned that terrible visage and seemed to look directly down the barrel of the scout's spyglass, as though making direct eye contact with the scout. He felt his heart jump up into his throat. Well then, the monster began to scream and claw at its terrible face. And that was when the scout started to run back to his village to warn them of the abomination he'd seen out in the mountains. He had no idea that in the process, he was going to doom everyone he'd ever known. The cruel irony is that if he'd remained where he was, he would have died, but saved everyone else in the process. That's because, as you've already intuited, he had a close encounter with the Shy Guy. Centuries later, when it's captured and contained by the SCP Foundation, it would go by SCP-096. 096 worked itself up into its rage state, an unavoidable side effect of anyone ever seeing its face, and charged after the scout. By the time it reached him, he was already within the limits of his small village again, desperately trying to explain the monster he'd seen to the village elders. But by that point, it was already too late. The Shy Guy rolled into the village square before the terrified eyes of all the villagers, and the massacre truly began. A nightmarish chorus of screams ringing out across the sky, only to be snuffed out one by one. Centuries in the future, people will forever ponder what exactly happened to this place, and the only one who will ever know is the Shy Guy himself, and he cannot speak the words to explain. Once everyone was gone, the Shy Guy's rage state subsided. It sat in the middle of the ruined village and began to weep into its spindly hands. It felt relieved that the others were gone, that they could no longer look upon its cursed face, but more than anything else, it felt so terribly, terribly lonely. Let's skip ahead a few centuries to Japan in 2023, when a very different creature is tearing its way through the streets of Tokyo. Hey, it wouldn't be the first. It's a giant insect-like being, big enough to eat a bus and still have room for seconds. Helicopters from the Japanese Defense Force circle around it, unleashing a hellstorm of bullets and missiles, which seem to simply glance off the monster's near impenetrable exoskeleton. It unleashes a piercing streak at a decibel level that turns the brains of the helicopter pilots to jelly. They drop out of the sky like flies and pirouette down into the ground below, erupting into fiery explosions as the insect monster continues its rampage. It simply walks straight through buildings, collapsing them in terrible cascades of broken glass, shattered concrete, and twisted metal. Police, SWAT teams, and military personnel have been powerless against the monster, and there are no A or S-class heroes nearby, just one lesser hero, the kind that nobody else would believe could slay a terrible beast like this, the kind of guy who's just a hero for fun. He runs in, his costume a flash of red and yellow, his chrome dome shining resplendent in the midday sun. The hero, known to the few that did know him as the Caped Baldy, but to his friends, he was always Saitama. But you might know him by a different name. Saitama, hoping for a monster that might give him a challenge after years of depressingly easy victories, charged towards the insect beast at full speed. If nothing else they'd thrown at it so far could beat it, then maybe it would give him a run for his money for once too. Something to make him feel alive again, like a living, breathing, struggling member of the human race. "Okay, Bug," he says to himself under his breath. "Let's see if you can show me a good time." With a tensing of his ankles, he fires off of the ground, heading up towards the giant insect like a laser-guided missile. This is it. This is what it's all been building to. But when he's connected with the monster's carapace, it explodes into green goo, splattering half the district as it burst completely open. What all those weapons failed to destroy, Saitama completely annihilated it in a single punch, leaving a city saved and himself standing on the asphalt, covered in green bug goo. Later on, the credit for the achievement would likely be given to one of the S-class heroes, but for now, defeating the insect monster would be its own reward, or at least, it should have been. Standing there in the streets, disappointed and gooey, One Punch Man himself also felt so terribly, terribly lonely. It had been an eventful few years for Saitama, ever since he'd started doing part-time contract work as an agent for the SCP Foundation. He'd countered and neutralized anomalies, he'd halted deadly containment breaches in their tracks, and made a whole lot of trouble for the various sinister groups of interest that would like to see the Foundation get put out to pasture. However, so far, every attempt to stop the Caped Baldy in his tracks had failed. Every assassin had been thwarted, every poison and bomb failed to do any lasting damage. As long as the SCP Foundation had Saitama on the payroll, they'd forever be on the back foot, and something needed to be done about that. Thankfully, a member of the Chaos Insurgency with a particularly creative streak and an utter disregard for collateral damage had an idea, and it would just be a matter of putting all the pieces in place. It could definitely be said of Saitama that he was not a paranoid person. After all, why would a person as unspeakably powerful as Saitama need to be afraid of anything? He kept the same routine every single day, even heading down to the same grocery store at the same time of day to take advantage of the evening deals. And that's exactly when an agent of the Chaos Insurgency would approach Saitama and deliver their trump card. Saitama was midway through testing different loaves of bread to see which one was the highest quality when a stranger approached him. A normal-looking guy with a look of glee printed across his face, holding a piece of paper and a Sharpie. "Excuse me, sir," the stranger said. "I don't mean to bother, but are you the famous Caped Baldy?" Saitama hated that name, but it was nice to get recognized. "Yep," he said. That's me." "I'm a huge fan of yours, sir. Would you be okay signing this photo for me?" "Sure, you got someone you want me to make it out to?" Saitama's words died in his throat as he looked at the photo that this strange fan just handed him. It isn't a photo of him or anyone else he recognizes. It's a pale, gaunt, bald-headed creature with blank eyes and a wide, gaping mouth. He is, needless to say, a freaky-looking dude. When Saitama looked up, he saw that the fan was already running out of the store. "Buddy, wait, you didn't even get your..." Saitama is once again unable to finish his sentence as the wall next to him explodes with sudden force as SCP-096 comes barreling through it. The Chaos Insurgency's plan has gone perfectly, as 096 hits Saitama with one of its grotesquely extended limbs, launching himself across the store into a rack of magazines. SCP-096 seemed like an unkillable being. It had faced everything from the full breadth of human weaponry to the claws and jaws of SCP-682, and always came out alive. Perhaps it would be the one being to face off with Saitama and actually live to tell the tale, or better yet, actually slay the pesky hero. The spindly monster didn't hesitate. It had an inherent sense of Saitama's location, sitting under a collapsed pile of magazines, and felt a burning, searing need to destroy this man, to annihilate the insolent creature that had seen its accursed face. It charged in towards the pile, grasping hands and terrible teeth ready to reduce this man to less than nothing. Suddenly, a hand rose out of the pile of magazines and flicked 096 with a single finger. With 1 microsecond of contact, SCP-096 was thrown into the wall of the grocery store, through a nearby building, and another, and out of the city into the nearby forested mountains, where its flying body cut a rut through the trees. It came to a sharp stop against the stone at the base of a mountain, sending a spiderweb of cracks across the ancient solid stone. For the first time in its at least centuries of existence, SCP-096 felt its relentless fervor for violence broken. It genuinely felt dazed by the hit, a sensation that it wasn't familiar with. And when its blurry vision recentered, it saw the source of its rage, Saitama standing right in front of him. How had he gotten here so fast? But the monster couldn't ask those questions. Not really. It was driven by rage, by violence. One of its deadly hands darts out to grab Saitama, moving with a force that would rip through concrete like tissue paper, that would kill or at least maim any living being. But Saitama, with unimaginable reflexes, caught it and held it in place. SCP-096 just froze up, having no idea what to do in this scenario. For a moment, Saitama's face remained placid and even betraying no emotion at all. He just stared directly at the monster's face, unfearing. And then, a single tear rolled down Saitama's cheek, and he gathered the monster up in his arms and squeezed tight, hugging it. If the shy guy was confused before, they truly didn't know what to think now. "It's okay. It's okay," Saitama said through shaky breaths. "I understand. You don't need to be afraid anymore. I get it." SCP-096 tried to writhe and thrash. It tried to attack the man hugging it, but its claws gathered no purchase. It was the first time that the shy guy had ever felt warmth from another being against its body for so long. "I know how much it can hurt to be bald," Saitama said. "How hard it can be to live with everyone else in society. But I get it, man. I get it." Saitama just sobbed openly in an unexpected outpouring of emotion. And when 096 truly realized that it could not harm this mysterious bald stranger, its body went limp, and it started to sob too. And for the first time for both Saitama and the shy guy, they didn't feel so terribly alone. And what a truly wonderful gift that was. A month later, Saitama and the shy guy were sitting in the living room of Saitama's modest apartment. Saitama's influence had been having certain effects on the creature. He taught it to wear clothes because he was worried about it getting citations for public nudity. The shy guy was sitting cross-legged on the rug, wearing a loose-fitting hoodie and shorts. But clothes weren't the only thing that Saitama taught this strange and tragic monster. "Come on, man, you call that a block? Are you even trying?" Saitama said. "You can at least try to challenge me here." The two of them were playing Street Fighter V, which the shy guy had gotten decent at, but still not enough to challenge Saitama, who himself was an admittedly mediocre player. It seemed that the shy guy was at least able to extract some joy out of the process, but he was still learning to pick up hobbies that weren't, murder. That's when a notification came up on Saitama's phone. He'd recently downloaded a new app exclusively for members of the Heroes Association, alerting local heroes as to when there was a monster attack in their area. It was a real lifesaver, seeing as he needed to fulfill a heroic deed quota in order to keep his membership. But something was different this time. The Caped Baldy had a sidekick. Not far from Saitama's apartment, a gang of vicious, genetically modified werewolves were attacking a local food court, illegally eating both the food and the patrons of the business with reckless abandon. But their monstrous feast came to an end when two figures slid onto the scene, a pair of bald men in somewhat ridiculous, homemade hero costumes. The only one of them was human in his dimensions. The other was a hell of a lot longer. "Okay, buddy," Saitama said, pointing at the werewolves. "This is your first test. Sick 'em. Now check out old SCP-096 versus new SCP-096, terrifying SCP-914 transformation, and SCP-096, look at a picture of Shy Guy in space, the Shy Guy questions and theories, for more.